and it's playing along at the same time. So as it moves through the file, it switches to the relevant piece of the transcription for that piece of the audio. And that's possible because the transcription was done in Elan. Elan is free software. It lets you transcribe media. So that is, it can transcribe audio and video. It lets you have multiple video files if you want. And it produces a time-aligned transcript of the media. And what that means is you can create an index of the media to begin with. So you may just want to say, this 5 minutes is this person talking, the next 20 minutes is a musical performance. You can do that gross level, higher level indexing to begin with, and then later on, if you want to, you can go in and do transcription of each particular part of it. And if you want to, you can just transcribe 5 minutes of a 30-minute recording because the rest of it isn't that interesting to you. So you don't have to do it all at once. The files that you create can be used for subtitling. You can subtitle a movie with it. Elan lets you slow down the playback so that if somebody's talking very quickly, you can slow them down to make it easier to transcribe them. It has a function where it will create chunks. Now, chunks is a technical term for segments in the transcription. And you can create segments or chunks in various ways. And that's what we're going to look at this morning. But one of the ways that Elan lets you do that is automatically based on the silence in the file. So it will detect a certain amount of silence and determine that that is the boundary between one segment and another segment. Elan lets you build a corpus of all of your transcripts, which is then you can search over them. You can have multiple tiers. So a tier is one of the levels of your transcription. So when you type in a transcription, typically that's one tier. You can have a translation, which is another tier. You can, if you want, include tiers for different gestures that people are using. You can have different tiers for different speakers. It's up to you how you organize the Elan file. But you should keep in mind that the more complex you make the Elan file, the more difficult it is to use it for other purposes later on. So you can make it very, very complicated. Today, I'm really only going to show you how to begin with Elan and how to do transcription, a line of transcription. We can talk about a line of transcription, translation later on as well, if you want. So the Elan is used by many, many people now. It's in constant development. As I said earlier, a new version came out 2 days ago. It gives you instant access to points in the media. So it's excellent for your analysis. If you want to cite an example in your written work, in your thesis, you can clip the text and it will bring with it the name of the file and the start and the end time in the media, which you can then use to cite your data in your research. Why do we want to do that? So that other people can also verify that that example occurred, so that they can listen to the context of that example, and potentially so that they can also use it in their own work, so they can also cite it. One of the problems we've had in linguistics is that people cite examples. Examples take on a life of their own, and they're not always cited back to an original source. So if there's a mistake in the example, that gets replicated through the literature. So you can download it. I hope you've all downloaded it. There is a version of Elan called Simple Elan, which I'll talk about today as well. And they're both freely available from the same download site. There is a manual that's updated periodically for Elan, which you can also get at the MPI site. The media that Elan can read depend really on the type of media that your system allows. So you can see there are a bunch of different video formats and audio formats. The annotation itself is stored in an Elan annotation file. So the file has the extension .eaf, but it's in XML format. So the file is in a format that is openly available. It's text encoded in XML. So this is a good thing. The other thing to keep in mind is that you don't change your media file when you do the transcription. The media file and the transcription are separate things. The media file is stored separately, and you make a reference to the media file in your Elan file, but the Elan file doesn't change anything in the media file. So we can make an index, which is probably a good approach, is initially to go through your files and make an index what is on them, of what is on the files. And you can then target which bits of the files you want to focus on for a particular purpose. So if you're interested in singing, you may make an index of all the singing that's in your corpus, and then you can go back to those singing bits of your recordings and transcribe them in more detail. But of course, you can also do a transcript in whatever detail you want. You can do phonetic analysis, phonetic transcription, phonemic transcription. Of course, it's up to you. Elan allows you to import files in a number of different formats. So you can see them there. So you can import files that you've already done some work in some other software, and you bring it into Elan so that you can time align it to the media. It also exports in a number of formats, which is quite important. And typically the workflow that we would have is that we would export to Flex format and then open the file in Flex to do the interlinearization in Flex. There is a version of Elan now that allows you to do glossing. That is, you can put your own dictionary or lexicon file into Elan and it will gloss by lookup. That is, it'll go through and put a glossing in word by word, which works okay. But if you've got a agglutinating or more complicated language that's not an isolating language, then it's not going to work so well. So that's why it's better to do the glossing in Flex, which knows about parsing. And of course, in Flex, you get the added value of building a lexicon, as you'll see in the next session. There are some demo files, if you want, that you can download from the MPI, again, at that website. And they give you a movie and a WAV file and an Elan file that you can look at. Simple Elan. Now, Elan is a very complex and mature piece of software that lets you do many, many different things. And that's a good thing, but it's also a bad thing. When you're starting, you may not want all of that complexity. You just want to be able to transcribe a file. So we helped build Simple Elan. We suggested that we need a tool that just lets you do a very simple transcript, but also that lets you time align an existing transcript. We know there are a lot of people who have transcripts that are in a format like Microsoft Word or text files, and they want to be able to time align them. So Simple Elan was designed for that. Simple Elan, you just drag a media file into Simple Elan, and then you can start transcribing it. You can paste a transcript into Simple Elan and put your cursor at the end of a sentence or a chunk, wait for the media to get to that point, hit return, and it will do the alignment. So you can go through a file in pretty much real time, or even if you want to, you can go a bit faster than real time and do the time alignment of your existing transcript. And you can do this just by playing the media file, putting your cursor into the right place and hitting return. So it just goes through and creates the transcript for you. The file that it creates can be opened in Elan afterwards. So Simple Elan might be a very useful tool for speakers who want to just go through and do a transcript and don't want any of the complexity of Elan presented to them. Doesn't need any setup, and then you end up with a good Elan file. And it deals with video as well, of course. Now, that was simple Elan, and now we'll look at Elan. There are many sources of information for Elan on the web. The MPI, where it comes from, has a list of third-party documentation, tutorials, online tutorials. There are courses run at summer schools all over the world in Elan, and most of them will put their materials online so that you can access them. And there's a big community of users that you can ask. Elan also has an online forum, so you can join that forum and you can request, well, you can ask questions about how to use Elan, but you can also make feature requests that they may take on because they're very responsive. One of the issues with Elan is if you want to see a waveform when you're doing a transcription, and it's very useful to be able to see a waveform because that helps you in your transcription. You can't see it. You can't see a waveform if you have a movie. You have to extract the wave file from the movie. So this is a bit tricky. Not everyone's comfortable doing it, but a very simple way of doing it is to use Audacity, which is free audio software that you've probably already got. You can open a movie file in Audacity, but you may need to download this FFmpeg extension. But Audacity prompts you to do that. So if you try opening a video file in Audacity, it will then extract the audio file from it, and you can save that as a WAV file. So this is if you've only got a video file and you want to transcribe it and you want to see a waveform, then you will need to use something like Audacity. There are other tools for extracting WAV files from video files. Elan lets you build a corpus. It has a very good search function. You can search within a document. You can search over a set of Elan files, and you can define a folder of files that is a corpus, and then you can search over that corpus. So here is Elan. You can specify a search domain, and you can make up your own search domain, and you can give it a name. You can see there are a number of search domains there already. And when you search for a particular word, it will then give you that word, and it gives you a before and after context of the word. And it also gives you a link. Basically, if you click on any of those, it takes you back to the corpus, and you can see the word and you can hear it in its context. So this is very useful if you're working, I mean, for your analysis, obviously, but also if you find mistakes. So when you're searching through your files, you might find some mistakes that you've made. You can search through this search function, listen to the original and correct your mistake. So if you've got an analysis that says a particular word shouldn't occur in a particular context, all the examples except 2 occur in the correct context, you can go back and listen to those 2 and see if you made a mistake in your transcription because you've got this immediate link back to the media. This is a very powerful way of improving your transcriptions. All right, I think what I'll do now is switch to Elan and we'll start working on a file. So when you open Elan, you get a screen like this, which is not very inviting. But what you have to do is open a new session, a new file. You can add a media file. So we'll go and find a media file. And we now have the media file in Elan, and you can see that it has a waveform. Can you see my cursor? Yes? No? Yes, good, okay. So you can see the waveform there, And you can see I can stretch the window so that I can make the waveform more visible. The first thing I need to do is to name this file. And the best way to name it is to name it exactly as the file that you're transcribing. So this particular file, I think, yes, there it is. So I would call it, so you can see the name of the file is here. It's nt1 n8001-b. So I will call it exactly the same thing, but with EAF extension, right? The next thing that I want to check is that Elan does an automatic backup, which is a very good thing. Elan is fairly robust software now, but it does occasionally crash. So it is a good idea to make backups fairly often. And you can see I've got it set to 1 minute. So this means if it crashes, I shouldn't lose more than a minute's work. So now what we have is Elan with a media file and a file name, and it's ready for me to start transcribing. And if I play it, okay, so you can hear there's the media there. What I can do if I want to transcribe that chunk is drag my cursor across that chunk, double click in this pink band and start typing the transcript in here. Okay, so that was clicking and dragging. Now, if you want to follow along and do this on your own computers, please do that. Clicking and typing the transcript in. So that's a very simple way of beginning a transcript in Elan. Now, if I've decided that this transcript actually is too long and I want to add more, I can click on that transcript and I can split it. So right-clicking in Elan gives you lots of options. So if I right-clicked on this one and split it, I can then drag my cursor along here. So what I'm doing here is using on the Mac the Option key. I think on Windows it's the Alt key. I can click the edge of the chunk that I want, the segment, and drag it along to whatever position I want. I can also, if I want to merge this annotation with the next one, in theory, don't know why it's not doing it, but in theory you can do that. There are a lot of functions for the way that you can interact with the segments. All right, now, clicking and dragging through the whole file is fine, but you can see that it's fairly time consuming and it's not really a way that you want to do this. So a better way of doing this is to use what they call segmentation mode. So Elan has a number of different modes. We are currently in annotation mode, but what we're going to do now is go to segmentation mode. And this will allow us to play the media and to hit return or enter. And it will then insert these boundaries of segments at each time that we hit a hit return. So what I did then was I went to Options, Segmentation mode. And what I'm going to do now is start playing the media and hitting return, and you'll see that when I do that, it will add the boundaries for me. And this is where having a waveform available is so important, because I can predict that a chunk, this will be a chunk, for example. That could be a chunk, or this could be a chunk, but these are silences in here. And I'm using that as a guide to when I'm going to hit return. So I'll just start it and do that now.
One belong C, one belong wall, before everyone you got. Elcow. Saan ngeen go to Westu, the Duab. Every morning you will picnic with a mama or abu, only go giving me come back or village.
Okay, so then you can see what's happened is now to navigate, we can use this at the bottom. We can also click up here. So this gives you a visual image of the whole file, and it shows you where your chunks are. And you can see in this file at the moment, the chunks are only at the beginning because that's all we've done. But each of these now is available to me to enter my transcription into. Now, we're in segmentation mode, so it will let me go through and do the segmentation, but to do anything else, I need to go back to a different mode. The mode we were in was annotation mode. I can go back to that, and I can add the transcription in here. But again, that's fairly time consuming, and a quick way of doing this is to go to transcription mode. Okay, so now I'm going to options, transcription mode. And in transcription mode, I can choose the tier that I'm on, which is called default. And what that does now is it presents me with all of the segments that I just created, and it lets me type the transcript in. Okay. And I can go to the next one and type the transcript in. So this is a much quicker way of doing the transcription. I can also loop on that, which means that now when I play that section, it will just keep looping over that section. So the way to work now is to set this up with looping. If I loop through this and type a transcript and hit return, I can type my transcript, and then I can go to the next one. It should play. I'm not sure why it's. Type the transcript, hit return.
Every morning you will picnic with a mama or abu. Every morning you will picnic with a mama or abu.
Okay, so this is the really efficient way of going through and adding the transcript. You can also at this point change the rate. So if you want, you can slow the speech down here using this rate slider, or speed it up if you need to. And that's then a way of doing the transcription. Okay. So I think what I'll do now is just ask if you have any questions at this point.
Nick, this is Ruth. Can you hear me?
Sorry, I can't hear you.
This is Ruth. Can you hear me?
Can you speak up? I can't hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, this is Ruth. I'm wondering if all of the options that you just showed us are available in Simple Elan as well. So
Simple Elan is really just you can do very similar things in Simple Elan. You can go through and do segmentation in Simple Elan. Yeah, I think really probably you can do some of this. We can try it a bit later if you want. I think you can, because it is a bit of a problem if you want to get people using this and they have to be switching between segmentation mode and annotation mode and transcription mode. It takes a little bit of doing. But I've run a lot of training workshops, and actually people in general get this very quickly, and it works very well. What we often do next is to add a translation tier, because it's often the case that somebody doing a transcription wants to add the translation straight away. So just a complete free gloss translation. And we can look at how to do that in a minute. But simple Elan will do a lot of this, yes.
Quick question. Can you hear me?
Yep.
This is Sydney.
Hello?
Hello. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, yes, yes.
So in that transcription mode where you're typing, I've used it before and I've had trouble figuring out how to use that function in IPA or even a non-Roman script. Have you heard of any sort of workaround for something like that?
It should work fine. You should be able to specify the font. You know, you specify the font somewhere in Elan, and then you should be able to do that. I'm just looking here as the font size is one of the settings, but you can specify fonts in Elan.
Elgo.
Usually you specify it when you build the tier, correct?
Yeah, I think so.
So then maybe it was just my own, I don't know, I missed something, but I've found that even if I specify the input method as an IPA font, when it's in this transcription mode, just in this way, it won't allow you to type using that.
Yeah. There are the various options for entry into the field. I expect, you know, I mean, one of the issues with this is what sort of keyboard you have and how easily you can type these, you know, IPA or whatever. But that's a sort of separate issue to Elan. So Elan does allow all of these entry fonts, character sets into the transcription line. Yep. Mm-hmm. I'll just go back to annotation mode and just look at some of the features of the window itself. If you open an MP3 file, you'll not see the window, the waveform. It can't generate a waveform from an MP3 file. So you have to have a WAV file to be able to do that. Within the WAV viewer here, you can zoom. It's just being a bit skittish today, I don't know why. So you can change the way that you look at this waveform. So if the waveform is very small, which it is sometimes, depending on how loud the file is, you can change the zoom. So this is just the view of the waveform. It's not changing the audio file or the playback at all. And you can also change the, I don't know why, of course, when you're doing a demonstration, things don't always work. You can change the vertical zoom and the horizontal zoom. So the vertical zoom we just changed, and if we change the horizontal zoom, we can change how much of the file we see at once. So if they're talking very slowly, you might want to bunch this up. If they're talking very quickly, you might want to space it out. But again, it doesn't affect the file itself. All it's doing is giving you a different representation of it. Making it bigger obviously is more helpful if you want to make more fine-grained decisions about where the boundary is. Again, moving the boundaries is using an Alt or Option key and clicking on the edge of the boundary and dragging it along. When you have an annotation, you can do various things with it. You can merge it with the one before or the one after. You can remove it, you can split it, and you can delete it. You can also, if you want, delete all of the annotations on the tier that you're on, to the right or the left of your current position. Now, one of the things that you may also want to try is the silence recognizer. Now we're in recognizers. So again, you're in annotation mode, but you're looking at the recognizers up here. And there are a number of different recognizers that Elan gives you. I'm just going to use the built-in silence recognizer, but there are others you can see there. And the number of these is increasing over time. So there are all kinds of really quite amazing things you can do now. Forced alignment of audio and text. But all we're going to do now is use the silence recognizer. To see this window in here, I have to move the window down a bit to be able to see what the settings are. Now, silence recognition is a trial and error project. So you select, have to look at the waveform again. And what we're going to do is tell Elan where there is silence, and within that silence, you can also tell it how long the silence should be. So if it finds a silence that's shorter than the specified amount, it won't regard it as silence. So if we select this example and ask it to go through the file and determine where silences are, you can see that it's done nothing. So you have to, maybe selecting manually instead of selecting manually. No, actually selecting by example. Selecting this by example. Yeah. No, I did this earlier and it worked perfectly well. Let's do it manually and see what happens when we just run it. Okay, good. So what we've got now is silence marked by S and content marked by X. You can see it's done a fairly good job here. And we've created a new tier in which we have silences and content. So we can go all the way through the file and see that it's done a reasonably good job there. And you can tweak it. So you can tweak the settings and try and run it. And if it doesn't work well, you can just go and delete these tiers. So I can delete that if I want to. And do it again. Okay, so the great thing about this is you're not committed to any particular outcome. You can decide to keep tweaking it until it gives you the sort of results that you want. So obviously this is the quickest way of getting your chunks organized in Elan, quicker than any of the previous ones. But with the proviso that you most likely will need to go in and tweak some of the boundaries. Now, Are there any questions about any of that so far?
Excuse me, Nick. Could you please make Elan full screen, because it's getting a little bit hard to see all of the detail.
Right.
Thank you so much.
Is there anything in particular you want to see again? Okay. So what we'll just have another look at now, have a look at, let me just run this again. Now it's full screen. So what I've done now is run the segmentation, the automatic segmentation again. Actually, I'll just mute you again. This time what I'm going to do is have it create a tier. Sorry, I'm just going to mute everyone. Okay. What I'm going to do this time is, rather than create segments with silences, which I don't want to see, I can create segments with just the content. So now what I've got is segments created just for the content. Sorry, could you please mute your mics? Thanks. Now, what I have now, in the grid, I can select a tier, and this is channel 1, 1, and you can see what I have now is a list of all of those segments. And they're all actually looking pretty good. So that's going to the grid up here, selecting the tier that I'm interested in here, and that gives me this view. I can also look at the text as just a lot of free-flowing text, and there you can see each of the segments just given as an X in this instance, but that would let me look at each of these segments again here, so I can navigate through the file this way. Now, what I can do now is, let's assume that these are all the transcription content here. What I want to do is create another tier which has translations in it. So what I'm going to do is, I'm going to copy that tier to another tier. But first what I need to do, so Elan, this is one of the reasons that Elan is sort of frustrating, is that it has these ways of conceptualizing the content. And what we have is tiers, and each tier has a type. And what we need to do first is to add a new tier type. And the new tier type that we'll create is a translation type. And the translation type, this is one of the beauties of Elan. So the stereotype is Elan's way of saying, what is the relationship of this tier to other tiers? And we want a symbolic association, which is Elan's way of saying that this tier's time codes are exactly the same as the other tier that we're going to relate it to. Symbolic association. So we're going to add a tier that's called a tier type that is translation, and it has the stereotype of symbolic association. we can talk about this more later. I know this is the area that is really quite confusing about Elan, but it's not, it doesn't need to be. Symbolic association is what you would use in this instance for a free gloss of a sentence. So these things have the same time relationship to the original media. So we're not talking about words within sentences, which would have, which would be divided up bits of a time segment. All right, so we've just added a type, and now what we want to do is add a new tier, which we can also call a translation tier. And the tier type is a translation type. You can ask questions about this if it's not immediately apparent. Now, what I need to do now is to copy the tier channel 1.1 down to the translation. So what I'm doing is I've gone to the copy tier. I've selected the tier I want to copy, which is the one that we just set all of the segments on. And now I want to copy down, and you see at this point it's asking me for the tier type. So you have to have set the tier type before you can do this. And now I want to copy it down to here. And in principle, what should have just happened is that all of the segments that we see on channel 1.1 should have been copied down to channel 1.1 copy. I'll have to figure out why that didn't happen, but that would then give me a way of looking at the segment and a corresponding segment. Yeah, so what's going on here? Corresponding segment which has the transcription and the translation in it. Then what you should be able to do is to look at your transcription in the transcription, in the transcription mode, and while you're transcribing, you should also then be able to type your translation. Now, I'll sort out what's going on with this and show it to you properly later on, but it's always the way when you're doing presentations that the things that you have prepared don't work, but I'm sure that they will, and I can show it to you later on. Now, are there any questions at this point?
Nick, I've got a question. It's Lee Brown here.
Yep.
When you're typing here, you can't copy and paste at all, can you? You just have to type in.
No, you can copy and paste if you have something that you want to paste in here.
But not from Microsoft Word.
Yes.
Oh.
Sure. From anything you want, you can copy and paste into here.
Okay.
Yep. So you can paste whatever you want into here. Microsoft Word, there may be some problems because the encoding of Microsoft, strange characters like smart quotes and M dashes and things could be a problem. But right. in principle, you can paste in here. But if you have if you have an existing transcript, then the best way of dealing with that is using simple Elan, not in here.
Right.
So,
okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Again, we can do a demo of that later on after 1 o'clock our time, if you want. I can get simple Elan going and show you how to do how to paste a transcript into simple Elan.
Thank you.
Are there other questions?
Hello, Nick. It's Hannah.
Yep.
I wonder if there's any way in Elan of editing the audio file to, I guess, restart work on a smaller section of a large file.
Mm.
As you can imagine, that would be a really handy feature if we could work out how to do it, because we often do have to create daughter files for broadcast or for particular audiences or whatever.
Yeah.
And it would be nice to be able to do that and keep the integrity of the transcription that, or whatever transcription that goes with it.
Yeah.
Rather than just going back to square one with editing and then exporting and then transcribing, etc.
Yeah.
Is there anything like that in Elan that you can share with us?
Yeah. No, you can't edit the audio file in Elan, but what you, I mean, so there are, I think, two different ways you could do this. One is you could just transcribe the piece of the file that you're interested in, right? So Elan would only represent, so if you've got a 30-minute recording and you're really only interested in the 20-minute to the 25th minute, you can transcribe them, keep the audio file intact, but your transcript only relates to that part of the file. So, I mean, if you can see this image of the file that we're in now, you could decide that you'll only transcribe, you know, say these few minutes here, and the rest of it would have no transcription. So that's one way of doing it. The other way is to use something like Audacity to snip the file up into bits. But then you've got a data management problem that you want to be clear about what those bits are and how they relate to the original file. So I'm not sure exactly what your use is, your use case is in this situation. Which of those might be better for you? Do you get what I'm suggesting? Hannah? This is social isolation. Okay, any other questions?
Oh, sorry, I was on mute.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you. That does, they're pretty much what we've been doing with Elan, just choosing sections to transcribe. But sometimes I just wonder if there are more efficient outputs with audio files from the program, but not at this stage. That's all right.
Yeah. The other thing that you can do in Elan is sync up files that are of different. So for example, if you have an audio recording and a video recording of the same event, you need to sync them so they both have the same start times. You can do that in Elan. And if you had different audio recordings, as you're suggesting you may have, you may be able to also sync them or take the transcript that has a different zero time. So if you have a recording that goes for half an hour and you've got a transcript that starts 20 minutes into it, if you want to snip that file just to that section, so starting at 20 minutes, your Elan transcript won't relate to that anymore because it starts at 20 minutes, it doesn't start at 0. So you can, in Elan, reset an Elan file to 0 for that particular file. Sorry if I'm not being very clear here, but you can change, basically you can change the 0 time for an Elan file depending on the file that you want to relate it to. So if you've had to change the file in some way, but you know that your Elan file still relates to the file from a particular start time, you can change the start time and move all of the time codes within Elan to match. So there are different ways of doing that. One way is to use what they call bulldozer mode. So up here you can see the time changes are bulldozer mode, and you can insert a time code and it pushes all of the time codes along the corresponding amount. So that's one way of dealing with having to change the time codes for some reason. Or for example, you've transcribed it you've transcribed a file, but then you've got a better version of the file that somebody's digitized, for example, and you need to realign the codes. Assuming there's still a one-to-one relationship between the time codes and the audio file, you can shift all of the time codes along to match the audio file.
I suppose that simple Elan might come in handy for that as well, in terms of exporting to a document and then possibly realigning stuff post-edit. So I guess my experience with the user case is that the more production versions you have, like resource creation, the more, yeah, as you said, room for error there is with not only file management, but the correlation, you know, the transcript integrity with time code. So whether it's film or whether it's radio, we're running into this all the time. And so simple Elan might be one workaround that I can see we might use to export transcripts and then realign them, you know, for particular edits.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's true, but I would try experimenting with Bulldozer and Shift Mode. Look at the manual for details of how they work. But I've used Bulldozer mode, for example, exactly that when I've had a video that I need to sync up with an existing transcript in Elan, I can, so one of the issues used to be that, you know, you would have files that were not exactly at the same speed. I think nowadays that's pretty much been fixed. But, you know, you would need, nowadays it seems you can just push the transcript along by, say, there's a difference of 5 seconds between the start time of your audio file and the start time of your video file. If you can push your transcript along 5 seconds, then it matches the video file pretty much all the way through. It may be that there's a cumulative lack of sync that you need to go and correct later in the video file. That can happen, but it's still maybe easier than transcribing or realigning the whole file.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions? Just to recap then, we looked at starting a new file in Elan, adding a media file, saving it immediately, naming it exactly as, naming the Elan file exactly the same as the media file, using the automatic backup so that we're saving it periodically, and then pretty much going straight to segmentation mode or automatic silence recognition to create the segments. And then from there, going to transcription mode to do the transcription in the segments that we've already created. So that seems, I think that's a good starting point. Obviously, there were some glitches along the way, but I'll try and fix them before I come back at one. But that's, I think, a good way to start working with Elan and to get you going with it. Yep. So I think that's everything that I wanted to talk about right now. So if you have any other questions, maybe now save them up and we'll meet again. So Rosie's going to give the next session in about 15-20 minutes, so at 11:30 our time. And then we'll meet back for an open sort of clinic, if you like, or questions, and potentially you can share your screens and we can look at how to do these things more one-on-one, although there are 30 or 40 people here, so it may not be completely easy to do, but that's what the aim of this will be. So if you don't have any other questions now, I think we can break and come back in 15 or so minutes. Okay? Good. All right. See you then.